They laughed at her tattoo, until the Navy SEAL commander stopped in his tracks and saluted her. That's when every soldier on base froze. That afternoon, the sun came down on Camp Pendleton like a fire hammer. The air was heavy with the scent of oil, sweat, and dry sand. Across the open ground, long lines of soldiers waited for their turn at the mess hall, their heavy boots thudding against the dirt, creating that harsh, steady rhythm, like the tired drumbeat of an exhausted army. In the middle of that line, Sergeant Brooke Taylor stood still, tray in hand, eyes fixed straight ahead. She didn't speak, she didn't complain. She took a deep breath and held her composure, like every day. Her sleeves were rolled up, not to show off, but because the heat was unbearable. But that small, ordinary thing was what started it all. A glint of light caught on her arm, a tattoo of a falcon, wings spread wide, inked in deep black. The lines were sharp, bold yet calm, a mix of strength and serenity. It only took a few seconds before a voice from behind called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Nice one, Sergeant," the voice drawled, laced with mockery. "Gonna fly that bird into battle?" A burst of laughter followed. That kind of laughter soldiers make. Rough, loud, and confident. They know exactly who fits where in the chain of command. Another voice joined in, teasing. "Maybe that's the logistics mascot, sending forms and stamps straight to the front lines." The group erupted in laughter, but Brooke didn't turn around. She didn't respond, didn't flinch. She only tightened her grip on the tray, her eyes still locked on the mess hall doors slowly swinging open. Her finger tapped twice against the tray's edge, a habit she used whenever she needed to stay calm. In the military, silence can be a kind of armor. But to those who don't understand, it looks like weakness. Brooke Taylor, 30 years old, Logistics and Strategic Operations Coordinator. Her file made it clear, non-combat personnel. Her job was to organize, track, and ensure that everything from weapons to fuel to rations reached the right place and person at the right time. No one paid attention to people, half joking, half serious. Wouldn't want ink from your paperwork getting on a rifle. She heard every word, but said nothing. The line inched forward. Brooke stepped up, sunlight catching her arm, the falcon ink glowing dark and proud, wings open, as if flying straight into the sun. Someone behind her called out again. "Why a falcon, Taylor? You like freedom or something?" She glanced down at the tattoo, then looked up, her voice calm, even. Something like that. No one understood what she meant, but when Brooke stepped through the steel door, the heavy clang that followed silenced the laughter behind her. They thought they knew who she was, but the truth that would silence the entire base was still hidden beneath that ink. In the military, silence can be a kind of armor, but to those who don't understand, it looks like weakness. They laughed because they didn't understand, and she stayed silent, because truth needs no defense. Midday at Camp Pendleton's mess hall was always loud. The clatter of metal trays, bursts of laughter, boots pounding against the floor, all blended into a chaotic symphony of military life. Amid that noise, Sergeant Brooke Taylor moved with calm precision, like a stream flowing against the current. She balanced her tray carefully, stepping through the narrow aisles between tables. No one noticed how each step she took carried a rhythm, exact, measured, as if everything in her life had to be in its proper place. And then, in just a fleeting moment, a private brushed past her, deliberately bumping her shoulder. The tray slipped from her hands. A harsh metallic clang echoed through the hall as food scattered across the cold tile floor. Instantly, every head turned her way. A voice rose first. "Nice job, Sergeant. Guess the enemy would surrender fast if you messed up their floors like that." The room burst into laughter. It spread quickly, sharp, cheap laughter, the kind soldiers make when they think they've just witnessed a little entertainment during another long day of drills. But Brooke said nothing, not a single word. She bent down, quietly picking up each piece of food, each fallen fork, moving as if it were a ritual. No anger, no shame, no glance back at those who mocked her. Only her hands, steady, patient, collecting everything, placing each item neatly back on the tray. The young medic stepped forward to help. Brooke shook her head gently, her voice calm but firm. "I can clean up my own mess. A soldier should." That short, steady sentence stopped the young man in his tracks. The laughter faded. The mess hall fell silent. When she was done, Brooke placed the tray on her table, sat in a far corner, and quietly ate what was left. No one dared say another word. Night fell. Lights across the barracks dimmed one by one, but from the logistics office a warm glow still spilled through the window. Brooke sat there, eyes fixed on stacks of paperwork, her pen moving steadily across the pages. No sound, except the faint scratch of ink over wood. Soldiers passing by would glance in, seeing her writing, always writing. No one's asked. But maybe that's fine. Silence is the only way to keep things intact. One day, they'll understand. She folded the letter, placed it in the box, closed the lid, and blew out the lamp. The next morning she appeared again on the parade ground, uniform crisp, steps steady, no complaint, no bitterness. Still Brooke Taylor, the woman with the Falcon tattoo everyone mocked. But those who looked closely would notice her eyes, after every day of silence, shone brighter, more resolute. The narrator's voice deepened, tinged with quiet sorrow. There are battles that never happen on the battlefield. They happen within, unseen. Yet they decide who's truly strong. I clean up my own mess. A soldier should. Some battles leave no gunfire, but they still leave scars. Time at Camp Pendleton moved slowly, as steady as the admin office's ticking clock. Training days, nightly inventories, morning drills, all unfolded in a familiar, predictable rhythm. But amid that repetition, the observant began to notice. Something about Sergeant Brooke Taylor didn't quite add up. While most of the unit was on the training field one evening, a young private passed by the women's quarters. Brooke's locker door was slightly ajar, a sliver of hallway light spilling inside. Inside hung a single photo, neatly taped to the inner door. At first glance, it was just a group of soldiers in the desert, shoulders touching, smiles half hidden beneath dust and heat. But there was something strange about it. Every face had been blurred, not by lighting, but deliberately, as if someone had erased their identities. Only one detail remained clear, a black and silver patch on a sleeve, a falcon diving, talons extended. The emblem of a special operations unit, one that only those who'd served in special forces would recognize. The private frowned, leaning closer to get a better look, when the locker door slammed shut. Brooke stood there, silent. Her eyes weren't angry, only calm, as if she'd long grown used to hiding something she could never speak of. Without a word, she turned the key and walked away. That night, the logistics yard was awash in white floodlights. Sweat glistened on Brooke's rolled-up sleeves as she worked beneath the glare. Nearby, a Navy SEAL, temporarily stationed at Pendleton for joint training, happened to be watching. He noticed her tattoo, the Falcon, wings spread across her forearm. But under the harsh light, something no one had ever noticed began to emerge. The lines of the wings weren't just decorative. They formed a sequence of tiny numbers and symbols, carved with surgical precision, connected like a string of code. The SEAL froze. His training kicked in instantly. He knew what he was seeing. Those were coordinates. Military coordinates, and not just any. They pointed to a range of hills in the Middle East. The site of Operation Red River, a mission so clear. Production batch, serial numbers 1472 through 1488. The men froze. One of them turned, wide-eyed. How do you know those numbers? We haven't even opened the crate. Brooke didn't look up. Her tone stayed calm. It's on the manifest. But everyone knew. The manifest hadn't been printed yet. No one could tell if she was telling the truth, or deliberately avoiding it. From that day on, the atmosphere around her shifted. The mocking laughter vanished. In its place, quiet stares tinged with unease. Brooke kept working the same way, silent, precise, disciplined. But her silence now carried weight, a depth, as if each step she took echoed with memories no one else had the clearance to ask about. The narrator's voice lowered, deep and solemn. They used to laugh because they thought she was weak. Now they're silent, because they've begun to fear she might be stronger than any of them. Some soldiers wear medals on their chests. Others carry a single tattoo, and inside it lies a story whose rank is not high enough to hear. Not everyone who stays silent is weak. Some stay silent because what they've lived through is too big to describe. She doesn't speak about her past, because her past is something this entire base isn't ready to understand. Afternoon at Camp Pendleton began with a dry, scorching wind sweeping across the dusty logistics yard. Rumors spread fast. Sergeant Taylor's been called in for a field skills test. No one knew why. Only Lieutenant Daniels said he wanted to see what the paperwork sergeant actually knew about weapons. Those who had mocked her were suddenly eager. A few eyes gleamed, waiting to see her mess up. Others, especially the SEALs training at the base, simply crossed their arms and watched silently. They didn't mock. Their eyes weren't amused. They were curious. Lieutenant Daniels strode into the warehouse, voice cold and sharp. "Parker. No. Taylor. You handle paperwork, right? Good. Let's see what you actually know about combat readiness." He placed an M4A1 carbine on the metal table, beside a few detached components, the bolt, firing pin, extractor. No one spoke. All eyes were on her. Brooke stood at attention, clipboard in hand. When Daniels ordered, "Disassemble," she simply nodded once. Then slowly, she set the clipboard down. Her hand reached into her uniform pocket, pulling out a small piece of black cloth. Without hesitation, she tied it tightly around her eyes. The room went still. Someone whispered, "What the hell is she doing?" Brooke laid her hands on the rifle. No sight. No hesitation. Every movement was fluid, precise, as if her body remembered what her mind didn't need to think about. Click. Firing pin. Extractor. Upper receiver. Lower receiver. The crisp, metallic sounds echoed through the warehouse, sharp, rhythmic, like the heartbeat of a perfectly timed machine. No one dared to move. No one dared to breathe. After 1 minute and 54 seconds, the M4 lay fully disassembled on the table. Every part aligned, clean, flawless, like a technical blueprint come to life. The armorer standing nearby finally muttered, "I've seen the best take 5 minutes. She didn't even need to look." Brooke untied the blindfold. She blinked once, took a quiet breath, replied softly, no arrogance, no defense. "It's all in the technical manual, sir." A faint smile touched the corner of Chief Miller's lips. "No, Sergeant," he said quietly. "What you just did isn't written in any manual." Brooke bowed her head, picked up her clipboard, and turned to leave. She didn't say another word, but everyone could see it. As she walked out the door, the entire room stood frozen, as if time itself had stopped to salute her. Narrator's voice lowered, slow and heavy, carrying the weight of realization. Some prove their worth by shouting the loudest. Others only need one act to silence everyone. She didn't need medals, didn't need applause. Just 1 minute and 1 rifle to prove her silence was never weakness. Sometimes the only answer to contempt is an act beyond doubt. She didn't need to say, "Who I used to be," because everyone had just seen it with their own eyes. Dawn broke over Camp Pendleton. The first light of day stretched across the rows of shipping containers and dry bands of sand. The faint screech of truck tires rolled over the concrete, then stopped. A convoy of military vehicles had just arrived. A group of Navy SEALs stepped out. They moved in perfect formation with no wasted motion, eyes sharp and cold, and faces bearing the exhaustion of men who'd lived too long on the edge between life and death. At the front walked Commander James R. Holden, a man who had led over 20 special operations missions in the Middle East. His chest was heavy with medals, but his eyes carried more memories than pride. At that exact moment, Sergeant Brooke Taylor stood at the edge of the yard, clipboard in hand, logging serial numbers, checking manifests, verifying transfers. Another ordinary morning, or so it seemed. Until Commander Holden's gaze stopped. He was mid-sentence with a transport officer when he froze. His eyes locked on a single detail, the black Falcon tattoo half hidden beneath Brooke's rolled sleeve. His breath caught. His body went still as if he'd just seen a ghost. He began walking, slowly, deliberately. The SEALs behind him sensed the change immediately. They halted in unison, and the entire yard began to watch. No one knew what was happening. Brooke looked up, startled to see the SEAL commander approaching. She straightened her posture, clipboard in hand, voice steady but polite. "Good morning, Commander. Sergeant Taylor, Logistics Division." Holden didn't answer. He stopped right in front of her, eyes fixed on the tattoo. His gaze softened, a mix of shock and emotion. Then suddenly, he stood upright and saluted. The sound of conversation, the rumble of engines, the wind itself all fell silent. No one moved. No one breathed. A SEAL commander, at least 3 ranks above her, was saluting a logistics sergeant. Brooke froze. No one had ever saluted her before. Indeed, not a man like him. Her voice trembled slightly. "Sir, I think you must have me mistaken for someone else." Holden kept his hand raised. His voice was gravelly, weighted with memory. "No, sir." Woman's voice, calm, measured, calling out coordinates, wind patterns, and every correction we needed. That voice belonged to her, Brooke Taylor. She found an escape route no satellite map could show. She decrypted enemy signals, jammed their fire frequency, and opened a rescue corridor. 14 minutes long. Just 14. But long enough for us to walk out of hell. Holden paused. His eyes met hers. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't be standing here today. And if any of you ever laughed at her tattoo, know this. It's not decoration. It's a mark of the living. No orders were given. None were needed. One by one, then two, then dozens. Every soldier in the yard, from SEALs to logistics clerks, from officers to recruits, stood at attention. Hands rose in salute. Under the blazing California sun, the entire base was silent. No laughter, no mockery. Only the wind brushing past the American flag, and a single woman standing still, eyes calm, unshaken. Sergeant Brooke Taylor raised her hand in return. No words, no smile, just a firm, silent salute. A gesture of gratitude that needed no translation. Narrator's voice softened, slow, carrying the weight of awe and respect. She was once the most underestimated person on base. Now, the entire installation stands at attention before her. She needed no medals, no press release, only for the truth to be spoken, once, and that was enough. That tattoo on her arm, it isn't a relic of the past. It's a witness to something immortal. The quiet courage of the unseen. They laughed when they saw that tattoo, but I bowed my head, because I know she earned it with our lives. She never needed the world to remember her name, only that somewhere out there, people still live because of her courage. The days that followed at Camp Pendleton felt quieter. No more mocking laughter echoing in the mess hall. No more whispers when she walked through the logistics corridors. Those who once ridiculed Brooke Taylor now avoided her eyes, not out of fear, but out of shame. They had realized that they'd been standing beside a true hero all this time, and never knew it. Brooke didn't change. She still arrived first, still left last. Her boots still shone, and her reports were still flawless down the line. But what had changed was how people saw her. When she entered the meeting room, voices lowered. The recruits stood a little straighter when she walked past the training yard. And when she sat in the mess hall, at that corner table where she once ate alone, there was always someone waiting just to share a meal with her. No one mentioned that day the salute that had silenced an entire base. No one needed to. From that moment on, Brooke was no longer the logistics clerk. She had become a symbol of quiet courage. A month later, Commander Holden prepared to leave the base. Before boarding the truck, he shook Brooke's hand. No ceremony, no cameras. Just two people who had survived a brutal chapter of war. He said softly, just loud enough for her to hear, "I've sent a report up the chain, acknowledging what you did. Maybe it'll never be made public. But for those who were there, you've already been honored." Brooke smiled faintly. "Sir, I don't need a record to speak for me. I just need to know when someone needed help, I was there." Weeks later, they found the letters in her locker, dozens of them, written over the years. Each one ended with the same final line, "For the ones who never came home." No one knew who they were for, perhaps for the teammates lost during that mission, perhaps for herself, the part of her soul still trapped in the memory of fire and chaos among choices paid for with lives. A young officer read one of the letters. He stood silent for a long time, then whispered, "Now I understand why she was always so quiet." One autumn morning, Brooke received the will to do what's right. If this story made you pause, even for a few seconds, share it, to remind the world that courage doesn't always have a voice. Like, comment, and subscribe to join Deep Life Tales in telling more true stories of military, veterans, courage, humanity. Because sometimes, the world stands firm only because of those silent heroes who never asked for recognition.